what should the Biden administration or the Democrats be doing?
Yeah, so two things. One, I think Merrick Garland has been generally underwhelming as an AG. I think there are many other things that he should be doing. But on this case, in this situation, I think he did the best he could. The DOJ lawsuit is actually really strong. It makes all the legal points. If you believe that the Supreme Court is nonpartisan and just looks at the law as it's written, well, the DOJ lawsuit should win every day 9-0 and twice on Sundays. Like it's tight, it's good. It refers to the Supreme Court's own precedents. There's no reason for the DOJ lawsuit to lose except for the fact that the court is controlled by 6 partisan hack Republicans, right? So that'll be a nice test case for the Amy Coney Barrett, Stephen Breyer theory of the case, right? But DOJ could only has to work within the bounds of the law. The executive branch as a whole, the Biden administration as a whole, has other kind of avenues of executive authority that it might want to look at. So, for instance, because of the Texas bounty system, when we say bounty system, what we mean is that the only enforcement mechanism for the abortion ban is private citizens suing abortion providers and people who aid and abet abortion providers for $10,000. That's the only enforcement. No cop is authorized in Texas law to stop people from getting an abortion. It's Joe Schmo with his 18 guns in his pickup truck that can do it, right? So how do we deal with that? Well, from an executive order standpoint, federal employees, government officials cannot be sued by private citizens if they are just doing their job. That's called qualified immunity. I'm sure I've been on your show to rail against qualified immunity,
sure,
because like qualified immunity is like the last thing that I hear before the cop shoots me, right? Like that. So like it's a double-edged sword to be sure, but I'm all for using the weapon of the enemy against them when possible. If Biden federalized abortion providers, or even better, created through an executive order an agency to go help protect people's privacy rights, well, those agents, be they doctors or counselors or whatever you want to call them, those agents could not be sued under the Texas law by private citizens because they would have qualified immunity. That would provide immediate relief. While the DOJ lawsuit is great, it's a lawsuit that will take months, if not years, to work through the system. Right now, there are women and girls in Texas who are being denied their constitutional rights. And I never know how many guys actually understand the female reproductive process, but time is somewhat of the essence here.
That's true.
About an unwanted pregnancy, right? So the difference between being able to get an abortion this week or 5 weeks from now is quite a big thing, both emotionally, morally, and legally. So right now, there are women being denied constitutional rights that will never have an opportunity to get them back if this goes on for too long. And Biden could ameliorate that today with an executive order sending troops and doctors to Texas to enforce the Constitution. Now, your smarter listeners will immediately, the Hyde Amendment. The Hyde Amendment says that taxpayer. I get it. The Hyde Amendment says taxpayer money cannot be used to provide abortion services. So one way around the Hyde Amendment is to not pass it again, right? If we pass it every year in the budget, we could just not do that. That would be one way to get around it. Don't pass it this time, Democrats. But Joe Manchin, he's so powerful and strong and his chin, I just can't stand up to. Fine. One way around the Hyde Amendment, even if we are determined to pass it again, would be to make the abortions free and make the doctors privately funded. Private funding in a public-private partnership can get around certain state regulations. I learned that from watching Republicans, because that's what they do with private prisons, Again, the Republicans have all of the weapons. They use them against us all the time. All I'm suggesting is that we pick up some of those weapons and use them for good as opposed to for evil.
Yeah, I think that those are some great ideas. They're not doing that. And so to close, my hunch, my gut says a combination of weakness, fear of what Republicans would say, political implications is why they're not. Is there anything beyond that that's leading them to not go down any of these roads that you've described?
most white centrist Dems don't actually support abortion. That's the other thing, right? I mean, like you can even see in the Biden pressers, they won't say the word. They'll say right to choose, they'll say rights, they'll say privacy. They won't say the word abortion, as if that alone is a dirty word. This is a party that while Republicans act like they are on crusade, like they are on some kind of holy war to stop baby apocalypse, Democrats for a generation have been like, well, we just want it to be safe, legal, and rare. Democrats act like they are sad that the cheerleader got knocked up at prom, but now what can we do? We have to. No, this is the switch that liberals need to make. It is barbaric to force a woman to bring a pregnancy to term against her will. That is barbarism. That to me, that's not the 9th Amendment or the privacy. That's a violation of the 13th Amendment. It's right there. Forced labor shall not happen in these United States. You cannot force somebody to labor on the state's behalf for free. I don't care how important you think the goal is. You can't force me to build a wall, even if the aliens are coming, right? You gotta pay me. We literally had a war about that. So what? Who in their right mind thinks that the government can rent out for free a woman's uterus for 9 months? That's ridiculous. So Democrats generally don't talk about abortion in that way. They don't talk about the moral harm of forcing unwanted pregnancies, right? Of forcing a woman to bring a pregnancy to term against her will. They don't talk about that in moral terms. They're not for it. There are some Democrats who are obviously for it. There are some who talk stridently and correctly about it. But the main centrist, kind of center mass of the party, they're uncomfortable with the issue. And that's why when I'm like, Biden should send abortion trucks to Texas, you got, that's crazy talk, right? Like that. It's one of the reasons why we have lost this battle over time.
Yeah. No, you're right. And look, there have certainly been a lot of topics where prominent Democrats have only followed very much in the wake of popular opinion on things like gay marriage and everything. This is something that people have supported for a very long time. I don't know. There are women who have born, lived their lives, and died having these rights enshrined by the Supreme Court. And none of that has been enough for the Democrats to speak as coherently about abortion as you just did.
It's overwhelmingly popular. It's overwhelmingly popular. Abortion rights, yes. Gun rights, no. Those are two overwhelmingly popular propositions. People will say, well, it's not that abortion on demand is popular, which is great because that's not the law. It's that most people think that abortion should be legal sometimes and illegal other times. Guess what? That's the law as it is right now. We already have that law. That law is Roe v. Wade. That law is Planned Parenthood v. Casey. There is no such thing as abortion on demand. What the Constitution says, what the courts have interpreted the Constitution to mean, is that women have a right to choose before fetal viability. So when the zygote embryo or fetus is still at a stage where it cannot survive outside of the woman's body, reasonably, we say, well, that then is the woman's choice to make. After it can survive, arguably outside the woman's body, after it can be extracted and incubated and whatever, well, then we say legally the state has an interest in making sure that pregnancy is safe or whatever. But this idea of abortion on demand, this idea that like at 8.5 months, a woman's just gonna be like, yeah, I don't want the baby, so now I'm gonna have an abortion. That doesn't happen.
That doesn't happen.
And the only people who think that happens are bad faith Republican selling you something on Fox News. So the concept that the overwhelming majorities of Americans agree with is the actual law now, and that is what Republicans are trying to change. And Democrats seem to have a hard time articulating what they're trying to change and why.
Yeah. Well, look, through the course of this conversation, we've tried to sketch out some of how things might go, some of how they could go. So you're definitely gonna want to go to The Nation and follow Elie's work as we roll on towards the culmination of a couple of these different cases that you've talked about. Elie, we appreciate both your work and your advocacy and also joining us today. It was a pleasure.
Thank you so much for having me, John. June on the Supreme Court is gonna be lit and it's gonna be terrible.
Gonna end on that dark note. Thank you.
For more political news breakdowns, interviews, stories of activism, and me trying my hardest to care about the occasional big celebrity news story, subscribe to our YouTube channel at youtube.com/thedamagereport. And you can ring the bell wherever it is so you don't miss anything.